Hey everybody, I'm Ryan and this is Minus the Gym, and in this video I'm going to share with you 9 calisthenics beginner mistakes that I made in the beginning that completely killed my progress, or halted it completely. So by sharing this with you, I'm hoping I can prevent you from making the same mistakes as well. Alright, welcome back to another video, and for those of you new to the channel, this is Minus the Gym. It's all about body weight fitness and healthy nutrition. So if that sounds up your alley, don't forget that subscribe button is always right down below. I'm going to do this as a countdown, so we're going to look at number 9 first and work our way to 1. So number 9 in my beginner mistakes that I made in calisthenics is neglecting calluses. And I know some of you hear that and you're like, what are you talking about? Because you probably don't hear about that too much, but if you're training a lot, if you are gripping parallel bars and pull-up bars a lot, especially when you start doing more explosive movements or when you start training the muscle up, you're going to develop calluses on your hand, right? They just become like a part of your hand eventually. But in the beginning, when I first started doing this, my calluses would build up and then they would tear. And that was the absolute worst, because when a callus tore, my hand would have this open wound, and it would hurt if I put my hand flat on the floor or gripped a bar. So I pretty much could not train upper body for like a week or so until it healed. So I have a couple suggestions to help prevent the calluses from tearing and even building up in the first place. The first suggestion, and this is what I use, is gloves. All right, when I'm doing a lot of high volume training, if I'm especially using bars a lot, I will use gloves like this. And what I like about this pair that I have is they have a wrist strap that goes around. So now you have wrist support, and that really helps if you're doing a lot of handstands or you're working on your tucked planche and other planche progressions. It will protect your wrist, and although later when you remove the gloves you'll lose some of that support, it's like a baby step, like a stepping stone to build up that strength. If you don't want to wear gloves, another option I've heard of people doing is buying files, and about once every week or two they file down their calluses to prevent them from tearing. So just a couple ideas, but don't neglect the calluses, because when they tear, it really sucks. Mistake number 8 that I made was not adding weight sooner, all right? And a little backstory to this, I used to lift weights in my 20s, and I found myself just really tired of it, and for some reason kind of rebellious, like I didn't want to be part of the gym culture anymore, and that's when I got into calisthenics. I'm kind of over that now, but when I first got into calisthenics, I didn't even like the idea of adding weight. I just wanted to use strictly body weight, and that's it. And that was a mistake, all right? As soon as you get an exercise to over 8 reps, you're now kind of out of that strength building range, which is I've found to be 5 to 8 reps. That's totally ideal for building strength. But once you creep up to like 10, 12, 15 reps, now you're just working on more endurance and hypertrophy. So it's good if you want to keep building strength to really consider adding weight. And I've made a couple videos on how I do this. In the beginning, I used a backpack and I would just put objects in the backpack, but then I decided to bite the bullet and buy a weighted vest. And that has been a great investment, no pun intended. And number 7 in this list is a big mistake that I made for multiple years when I first started training body weight fitness, and that was cheating on range of motion. Okay, so what I would do is I would just be more focused on the number of reps that I was trying to achieve. And I'd cut corners, right? I would maybe not go all the way down on push-ups or all the way down on pull-ups. And this may seem okay because there are studies showing that in terms of building muscle, there's some variance. There's like a buffer of, I think it's like 15 or 20 degrees, that you don't have to go all the way through the full range of motion and you will still get the benefit in terms of hypertrophy. But when it comes to skills later on, like if you haven't been locking out and going all the way up on your push-ups or your dips, then you're not building that straight arm strength, and that's going to hold you back later on. So there are situations where you're gonna find that you got to take a step backwards if you haven't been doing the full range of motion, and it will kill your progress. So don't do that. Don't cheat like I did. Focus on full range of motion, and don't be too focused on the number of reps. That should come second to the quality of the reps that you're doing. All right, mistake number 6 in this list might sound kind of weird coming from me, because if you've checked out my other videos on my channel, you'll see that I am really into progressive exercises, okay? These like like taking one exercise and breaking it down into multiple progressions. I actually love doing that. I've done that before myself, just kind of like deconstructing an exercise. But there was a time where I wasn't doing that. When I first got into calisthenics and I came from simple, weightlifting exercises where you're not progressively changing the movement. So what I ended up doing, a good example was like the handstand. I would just kick up over and over and over, like multiple days a week, until I finally realized, like months later, that I really hadn't made any progress. I'd maybe catch a handstand for 5 seconds, but I didn't understand how I was doing it, and it wasn't consistent. And my handstand was not straight, it was more, arched like a banana. Once I realized that I wasn't getting anywhere with the handstand, I deconstructed it, broke it down into 4 different progressions, which I shared. I actually have a playlist of multiple, I think it's like 5 videos or 6 videos, where I show you the 4 steps that I use to get the handstand. And that's, I did the frog stand to build up my wrists and arms and my shoulder girdle. I learned the headstand so that I could get the core and lower body piece down, being inverted. And then I put it together against the wall. So I did wall handstands and then took it away from the wall. And those 4 steps, they brought me to a handstand much faster than if I just kept kicking up over and over and over. And going in line with that is number 5 on the list, not using assistance. All right, and what I mean by that is like you can use rubber bands, fitness bands, to provide assistance in your exercises. And that is great. Like if you are working on one progression and you're really good at it, let's say it's the advanced tuck front lever, and you can hold it for 20 seconds and you're ready to move on to the straddle or maybe one leg extended. But when you try that, it feels impossible. Now what you can do is use an assistance band to introduce, it makes the resistance lighter so that next progression becomes easier. Don't make the same mistake I did, all right? I think it was my ego getting in the way, but I wasn't using the bands. I wasn't using assistance when I needed it, and that was holding me back. It was killing my progress. So don't do that. Don't let the ego get in the way, and don't be ashamed if you use bands or anything, like even a harness for assistance, because it really helps. It's great, and you should do it. Okay, number 4 on the list is what I call the bodybuilding mindset, and let me explain what that means. Basically, I come from a background of lifting weights and bodybuilding, like not competing, but just doing it as a hobby. So a lot of my focus and a lot of what I was doing was striving for gains. And when you do that, when you come from a bodybuilding background, a lot of what they do is high volume training, lots of sets and lots of reps. And the reason for that is something called sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. That's a type of hypertrophy where more sarcoplasmic fluid is retained in the muscles, meaning more ATP, more muscle glycogen, creatine phosphate, water retention. So doing that high volume training works if your goal is to just look bigger, like physically larger. But when it comes to gaining strength and achieving new movements, new skills, it's not going to help you. Instead, what you want to focus on is called myofibrillar hypertrophy, which you can think of that as when you are working more on strength. You're building strength and you're not retaining more fluid, you're actually building the muscle fibers larger. Okay, it's a slower process, a much slower process to build mass from myofibrillar hypertrophy, but it's denser muscle tissue and it sticks around longer. Anyways, my whole point here is if you are like me and you're coming from a background of bodybuilding and lifting weights and doing high volume training, and your new goals are to achieve these incredible feats of strength, you're going to want to totally shift your focus to a new style of training. Get out of that bodybuilding mindset. Forget the high volume training. Start focusing on just resting long between sets, focusing on the 5 to 8 rep range, and really opening your mind to all the different facets of fitness like flexibility and mobility, balance, agility, all these other things that get neglected when you're lifting weights. Okay, and number 3 on this list, right? My 3rd biggest mistake I've made is training too often. And let me clarify that because it really depends on your goals. So if your goal with calisthenics is just to look muscular and have a good physique, you want to get really shredded and you want to have big muscles, then training often is actually kind of a good idea. Because like I mentioned previously, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, right? You train more, you retain more fluid, and you just got to do your cardio, not eat too much, and make sure you get enough protein and you'll lean out. It takes a lot of dedication, but you can do it. So there you go. That's when training a lot, I'm talking like 6 days a week, can actually be a good idea. But here's the thing. if you train the same movements in the same muscle groups, there's no way you're gonna be building consistent strength. And that's critical for if you're in this for skills and for impressive movements and feats of strength, then you're gonna wanna make sure you don't train too often. What you wanna do is make sure you give yourself the rest you need. Don't get carried away. Make sure if you're working on a movement, have a day off from that movement the next day, all right? So maybe like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I've even gone as little as twice a week. So I'd work a movement like Monday and Friday, Wednesday and Saturday. So I'm only doing it twice a week. I have plenty of days off in between to rest that muscle group and my central nervous system. And I really saw a lot of progress. It was consistent, gradual progress, just doing 2 or 3 times a week. All right, mistake number 2 on my list is inconsistent programming. And this was totally just me experimenting and trying different workouts. I would do a workout for like 3 weeks and just to judge like, okay, what's it doing to my physique, for instance, and then I would switch it up completely and try that out. And I wasted months doing that. And then I realized, whoa, I'm not gonna really achieve any big goals if I keep changing things up. And I know a lot of people do this, they kind of question, they'll hit a plateau and they'll question their entire program. Don't do that. Here's my advice if you wanna avoid this mistake. Do your research, put together your own routine, or buy a program from someone online, or maybe get a program from a book. There's plenty of good books out there, and then just follow it through. Follow it through, and if at any point along the way you hit a plateau, just make small tweaks. Don't completely change things up and abandon the program. Stick to it and just make minor tweaks that you think will help you stay on track. All right, and now for my number 1 mistake that I've made in calisthenics, not just as a beginner, but even because I continue my journey through intermediate and approaching advanced, not training mobility. Huge problem that's gonna hold you back. It's going to just kill your progress because you're gonna pursue an exercise or a skill that you physically can't even do, even with 0 resistance. If you don't have the range of motion, if you can't move your joints through that range of motion, you will not get that exercise. I mean, if you're young, if you're like the other calisthenics YouTubers that you see who are in their teens or their early 20s and they were athletic in high school and they have plenty of flexibility and mobility and they just need to build the strength, then fine. Then this advice doesn't apply to you. But for those of you in my audience who are like me, you have a normal life, maybe you've been working a desk job for a long time, you're raising kids now, and you've been just doing all these life things that have affected your mobility. Maybe now you can't touch your toes, right? Maybe you pull a muscle. Like at one time I pulled a muscle in my back just flushing the toilet. That's really embarrassing, but that's happened to me. And that's because we have lost mobility. So you need to train it consistently, just as consistently as you're training strength. It needs to be part of your routine. And that's why if you guys are paying attention to my channel, you might have seen recently I started doing animal flow. It's because I know I need to improve my mobility much further if I'm gonna be doing, human flags, freestanding handstand push-ups, and planche. I need to improve, especially my shoulders. My hips still need some work too. And I'm not ashamed to say that. So I'm gonna keep working on my mobility. And if you follow me here on Minus the Gym, I'll share everything I learn along the way with you. So this is just one of those things where now that I've gone through and done all of this and learned this, if I could go back and do it differently, I would. And I wanted to share that with you. So any of you making these same mistakes now, hopefully you can take a step back, realize what you're doing, and try my advice because I think it'll help. As always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to drop a like if you found this video helpful, all right? And subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.